Hey, good afternoon to you. It's now 3:06 News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up this hour, Carrie Severino is here at 3:30 from the Judicial Crisis Network. We'll talk to her about Joe Biden's anger at the United States Supreme Court for constantly placing checks on his tyranny. Now he wants to gut the court, of course. Typical. Mary Catherine Ham joins us at 4:30. We'll talk to her about white women for Harris. Can you believe this? Of course you can. The left getting back to its roots. Segregated events for politics now. Kurt Schlichter is here at 5 o'clock. We'll talk to him about the strategy for defeating Kamala. And Congressman Tom Emmer joins us at 5:30. He was with President Trump at that big rally in Minnesota this weekend. We'll discuss that and so much more. And you can join us at 888-630-9625. 888-630-WMAL. The left thinks they can take us on in the Weird Olympics. They think you are weirder than they are. That's impossible. I don't even know you specifically, but I know you're not weirder than these people on the left. You're not weirder than Rachel Levine. the fake admiral, the dude who wears a dress. You're not weirder than that guy. I'm sorry, I hate to tell you. Unless you're Rachel Levine, then you're just exactly as weird as Rachel Levine. But you're not weirder than him. At all. You're not weirder than Pete Buttigieg. Pete Buttigieg is a weirdo. The guy goes on paternity leave for months at a time, doesn't tell the American people, and we keep paying him. He's a weirdo. He doesn't actually ride his bike to work. He pretends. They drop him off a block from work. He rides it for 50 feet, and then he's done. He's burning all that gas as he did that. He's a weirdo, okay? And you're not as weird as he is, unless you're him, again. So this idea that they've been attacking J.D. Vance this past week. What a weirdo. He wrote a book. What? What's weird about it? He wrote a book called Hillbilly Elegy. It was a bestseller. In fact, the left loved it not too long ago. They thought it was great before J.D. Vance was a politician, before he engaged in doing his part to help the country out, running for the United States Senate. They thought he was great. They thought he was great. They propped him up. They put his book everywhere. They made a Hollywood movie about him. They thought he was awesome. He was the muse to middle America. We don't want to talk to those people, but so long as someone has, maybe we can learn something about them. So that was J.D. Vance. That was what J.D. did for them. Plus, he went to Yale, so he's kind of from our world now. So we can talk to him. We can pretend like we care about the hillbillies, but they don't. They haven't. And now they hate him. They absolutely despise him. And so they're pulling excerpts from his book. Look, what a weird upbringing he had. What a weird guy. Really. Now, there's no, honestly, if you're competing, there's no winning against the left in weirdness. Weirdness is a defining feature of the American left. Look no further than that grotesque Olympic display we saw Friday night in the opening ceremony. We were getting the first images of it while we were on the air still Friday because, of course, all of this takes place earlier than the American audience tends to see it, which would have been Friday night in the NBC telecast. But you're watching as we've got an array of dudes in dresses and makeup making mockeries of women, drag queens, were put on television and represented the Last Supper of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. And they were depicting it. And it was so transparently obvious to anyone who even glanced at it. You didn't need to be some art historian in order to recognize Da Vinci's Last Supper painting, in the way that these drag queens were portraying themselves. So they're on this screen, the camera pulls to a wide shot, it's a long table, they're all around moving slowly, gesticulating in these sexualized outfits, men dressed as women. They unveil a man who's dressed in nothing practically, a Speedo in blue paint, on a table, writhing on the table. And then they're demanding that you think that this is high art and that you accept this blasphemy, this attack on the, 2.6 billion Christians around the planet. Great. This is great. Way to go. Opening ceremony of the Olympics. On that issue, they did so many crazy things Friday night for this opening ceremony, all of it coming across my social media feed. There was this and that and this and that. Guys, bearded men in dresses. Of course, you've got the drag queens portraying the Last Supper. They had two dudes and a woman portray a menage a trois, like in the opening ceremonies. And, the Olympic opening ceremonies, what are these supposed to be? Well, they're supposed to be a time that people from all around the planet can watch and find out a little bit about the culture of the country that's hosting, first and foremost. And then it should be the kind of event that you watch with the same age level of people that might watch the sports, the actual athletic competition. And that would include children all across the planet who want to see their nation's athletes compete at the highest level and possibly win, take home a gold medal, or at least make an effort to do it, right? And so you have kids watching opening ceremonies, and you have to have parents now describing to their children, to the extent that they maintain their vision on this at all without shutting it off. What is that, Mom? What is that, Dad? What am I looking at here? What are these two men and this woman? What are they doing as they go into a room suggestively and then shut the door in front of the camera? What is that? What was that supposed to be? What's a man doing in a dress, dancing in front of the camera? What are all these drag queens? Why does that look like the Last Supper? What is that? So it's grotesque, and it was meant to be offensive. I love that the Olympics now, the guy who put it together is insisting, oh, no. I'm sorry if we caused any offense. I had no idea this would cause offense. Nonsense. Total nonsense. You intended for it to cause offense. And in fact, the drag queens are participated in it, because they're not exactly known for subtlety. They let the cat out of the bag after this event because they confirmed it was a mockery of the Last Supper. The Catholic Herald did the write-up on this. A headline, drag queen confirms it was a parody of Last Supper despite Olympic Committee's claim. The claim, by the way, came from a spokeswoman called Anne DeCamp. She said, clearly, there was never an intention to show disrespect to any religious group. The opening ceremony tried to celebrate community tolerance. We believe this ambition was achieved. If people have taken any offense, we are really sorry. Sure you are. They're sorry that if people took offense, is the claim. The drag queens here saying, yeah, of course it was the Last Supper. Art always divides, said one of the drag queens. As long as it doesn't move people, it's not art for me. It's not a provocation. It's a biblical representation that has been reused in pop culture for decades, and it's never really been a problem. Barbara Butch. This can't be her real name. Is this really her name? Barbara Butch? Barbara Butch, a lesbian who donned a silver halo crown headdress and low-cut dress while portraying the figure of Jesus in the Last Supper sketch, said the opening ceremony was intended to, quote, bring people together. She posted a screenshot image of her performance in the Last Supper parody above an image of Da Vinci's original painting to her Instagram account with the comment, oh yes, the new gay testament. Exclamation point. The post was subsequently deleted. Why was it deleted? What you don't stand by your excitement, your celebration of what you did in an international stage? Oh yes, the new gay testament, she wrote. So they were explicit about this. They're about as explicit as you can get, including declaring that this is precisely what they did. And it's totally contemptible. Totally contemptible. It's been good to see some people, in official capacities have raised a stink about this. There have been Christians around the world who are outraged about this and are saying so publicly, and you should say that. There's a bishop here in the United States by the name of a Catholic bishop by the name of Robert Barron, who's been particularly outspoken about this, which is a good news. Here he is talking about this supposed apology, and he says, no, this is garbage. This is woke duplicity.
This is Bishop Barron. A few days ago I did a video complaining about this outrageous opening ceremony at the Olympics, and the video went viral, and frankly I had no intention of returning to the issue until this morning. I saw the so-called apology from the organizing committee, and I thought it's anything but an apology. In fact, it's kind of a masterpiece of woke duplicity. And so I just wanted to say a few things, because if they felt this is meant to mollify Christians, I would think again. Here's some of the things that were said. Clearly, there was never an intention to show disrespect to any religious group. Give me a break. So we have a group of drag queens cavorting in a kind of sexually provocative way, clearly an imitation of Da Vinci's Last Supper, which presents to the world the Last Supper of Jesus. And no disrespect was meant. You think anyone takes that seriously? I love this. We tried to celebrate community tolerance. Yeah, tolerance. Except for those pesky 2.6 billion Christians on the planet. Everyone's welcome. Everyone's tolerated. All this lovely diversity until you get to anyone that disagrees with your ideology, like these 2.6 billion people.
Right.
So don't give me this business about tolerance and diversity. And then we believe this ambition, celebrating tolerance, was achieved. Well, I wonder what planet they're living on. If they think that harmony and peace and all this was achieved by this clear affront to Christians. And then at the very end, a standard bit of condescension. If people have taken any offense, we're truly sorry. In other words, if you're so simple-minded and stupid to have been offended by this wonderful expression of French culture, well, we're sorry about that. Christians were offended because it was offensive, and it was intended to be offensive.
Right.
So please don't patronize us with this condescending remark about, well, if you had any, bad feelings, we're awfully sorry about that. Again, if people think this is somehow going to mollify people all over the Christian world who are outraged by what happened, I would recommend thinking again. And a real apology would be something like, this was a mistake, it should never have been done, and we're sorry for it. I don't think Christians should be mollified. I think we should keep raising our voices.
Yeah, amen to that. And so what's happened now? Well, the Olympics have the people who are responsible for all of the actual broadcast. They've removed all of this from YouTube. You can't watch the opening ceremonies now anymore from the Olympic channels on YouTube. They've removed the opening ceremonies. So their bit about like, there's nothing wrong with this. We're sorry if anybody took offense, but we didn't mean any offense by. Oh, really? So why'd you take it down? Why'd you take down the whole opening ceremony? Why was that video removed entirely? They're memory holing it. They're trying to skip right past this scandal in the hopes that you don't really think about it anymore. But it once again goes to show you the low regard they have for people of faith and Christians in particular. And it's just and at the tippy top of the power structure, they love talking about power structures, don't they? The left is this type of destructive and secular, definitely, but in many regards, a demonic behavior. This is blight supremacy. This is absolutely corrupting, and they love it. This is their whole thing. They just want to make a mockery of decent people who want to tune in and watch athletic competitions with their families, and they're just giving you a middle finger right there on television, right there from France. Meanwhile, here in the United States, the dummies who assess things for us in the media, they thought that everyone's making much ado about nothing here. Here's Whoopi Goldberg on The View.
But then there was instant controversy over an opening number featuring drag performers that some people said was a blasphemous take on Da Vinci's painting, The Last Supper. Now, organizers said, we're sorry, but, the guy who actually put it all together said it was from the Feast of the Gods, which is a 17th century Dutch painting of the Greek Olympian gods.
Maybe to check with the people who participated in it, the actors said that it was the Last Supper.
The Olympian gods, because it's the Olympics. Okay.
I love how she's lecturing us like she knew any of this before today. She was even aware of Da Vinci's painting.
And there are many more people in the picture they're talking about here. There's people on the side, and it's like, come on, y'all. It's the Olympics. Stop.
Yeah, so don't get mad about it. It's the Olympics. You're not allowed to see when you're being absolutely trashed by the people who organized it.
They're not trying to do anything except talk about the history. They're showing you the history. There are too many.
Wasn't this lady a nun at one point? She was a nun. Shouldn't she know? Sarah Haynes, also one of the hosts on The View.
Well, and
It's just more people.
When you're criticizing religion and people were offended, the director said it wasn't what he intended, and he also said the mission was inclusion. Intention matters.
Inclusion.
He came out and said, that wasn't what I intended. I'm sorry.
Let's just start at the basic. Even if we didn't get to the point where they're doing a parody of The Last Supper, if you have men dressed as women with fake cleavage and makeup and hair extensions, at some point, you're like, that's kind of crazy, right? That Like that part's fine. That part's totally vanilla. It was the Last Supper part that's awful. No, it's all awful.
That's what offended you, and this is what I was trying to do. Don't go, I get so frustrated with religion. Don't go by the literal letter of the Bible. Go by the example of the word, which is live with the grace, live with the forgiveness, live with, I was frustrated, you answer, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And then she's going to tell you, I'm going to play it for you now. She's going to tell you that you don't even know what it means to be Christian if you were offended by this.
I get so tired of being beaten over the head with religious messages while someone walks along their life not living like Jesus at all. Like, really understand the mission.
Yes, because Jesus definitely wanted a fat lesbian with her breasts hanging out, depicting him in a Last Supper mockery. Because Sarah Haynes read that in the Bible. Line 2 is where we find Chris in Marshall. Chris, good afternoon, sir. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Good afternoon, the front line of the heartland. Listen, if they really want to be bold and daring, I'll pay $1 to see them do a drag queen conga line around Mecca. And I'll even pay $2 if they do it on site, and I'll contribute to their travel expenses. Isn't it disgusting to think that they actually gaslit us by saying that decency was on the ballot and that the adults are in charge now? How disgraceful.
Very disgraceful. In fact, I'm wondering to what extent the Olympic broadcast was censored in majority Muslim countries, if at all. My guess is it was, because in these, each of the countries gets their own broadcast, and they handle it with their own people, and then they air it, at their relative prime time. My guess is that this event, I haven't seen anything to confirm this, so I'm just guessing at it, was censored in some countries who didn't want to watch a menage a trois on screen.
Right. Corey, get on it. Let's find out.
Yeah, Corey. Yeah, Corey. Chris is giving you orders. Yeah. Thank you, Chris. I appreciate it. I just saw Chris last night, too. It was great to see him. All right. Coming up, we have Carrie Severino. She's joining us from the Judicial Crisis Network as Joe Biden calls for fundamentally gutting the United States Supreme Court because he's mad at them that they've been a check on his tyranny. More on that coming up with Carrie. Good afternoon to you. It's 3:35 now. News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up next hour, Mary Catherine Ham is here at 4:30. We'll talk to her about Democrats holding segregated events to get Kamala Harris elected president. Yes, it's as crazy as it sounds. Kurt Schlichter will be here at 5 o'clock. We'll talk about the normal person strategy for defeating Kamala Harris. And Tom Emmer, the congressman, is here with us at 5:30. He just spent the weekend with President Trump. We'll chat about that and a lot more. And you can talk to us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Joe Biden, of all people today, in an op-ed for the Washington Post, is accusing the Supreme Court of conflicts of interest. He's saying that government officials should not be corrupt, and they shouldn't have even the appearance of conflicts. He's calling for more turnover on the court. He despises that court because it's been a constant check on his abuses of power. He also wants a constitutional amendment specifically to target President Trump. He says he's just doing it because no president should be above the law. For more on this, I want to bring in Carrie Severino now. She's the president of the Judicial Crisis Network and the co-author of Justice on Trial, the Kavanaugh Confirmation and the Future of the Supreme Court. Carrie, good to have you back with us.
Great to be here.
So Joe Biden announces a 3-part plan today, calling for a constitutional amendment to go after presidents of the United States, namely Trump. That's who he wants to go after. He wants to appoint a justice every 2 years, presidents can, and then give them 18-year term limits. And then he wants to impose new ethical standards on the Supreme Court. What do you make of these proposals?
Look, all of this is such clear partisan politics. None of it has to do with ethics on the court. Well, obviously, we know that trying to undo the Supreme Court decision on Trump has nothing to do with that. What's going on here is the Democrats and Joe Biden, who's happy to do whatever he can to try to revive people's opinion of him, they're so frustrated that they have a court that is not willing to just go with whatever their policy proposal of the day is, that they're lashing out. They're trying to undercut the Supreme Court's actual decision. They're trying to pack the court. The term limit proposal is really just it's court packing in a tuxedo. It's really just an attempt to pack the court through a slightly different means. Leave aside the fact that obviously none of this is something that the current Congress is going to consider passing. Term limits is something that no Congress can constitutionally pass because it's in the Constitution. All of this just shows, their agenda is utterly at odds with the Constitution itself. That's their problem. The problem isn't really with the court; it's that they're frustrated by the Constitution itself.
The term that we just completed with the Supreme Court involved a lot of giving power back to the people, especially overturning things like the Chevron decision, and saying that we shouldn't concentrate so much power in the federal government. We shouldn't allow the agencies to just make up laws. The people's representatives actually have to write the laws. So when Biden says in this op-ed today, or whoever wrote it for him, that, quote, we can and must strengthen the guardrails of democracy, he must view giving the federal government more power as, quote, democracy.
Look, I do not think that word means what you think it means. They just use the word democracy for whatever they want to do, just like they're going to say, we have to subvert the voting process to get the president we want in defense of democracy. Like, no, that's not how it works.
Right.
Just like this is not about democracy. None of this is what is actually attempting what they're saying. If they were really concerned about ethics, and they would actually be looking to themselves. The people who are the most corrupt, who are getting more kickbacks than anyone else, are the very members of Congress who are proposing these kinds of things. If they really were interested, they would be happy to pass a across-the-board ethics guideline saying, okay, no one gets to ride in a private jet. No one gets to have a trip that someone else is paying for. But the congressmen want that for themselves.
Yes.
They just don't want to do it if it means a justice that they disagree with is going to do it. Well, you notice they're only looking at term limits after their octa and nonagenarian justices have left the court. So we had a 95-year-old justice who is serving and was liberal. No one is worried. Now suddenly when it's Justice Thomas and Justice Alito, they're the eldest members of the court, we need term limits. Come on, folks. We know what the deal is.
Yeah, and they have a special contempt for Justice Thomas and Justice Alito because they adhere to the Constitution, the vision of the founders, and making sure that the people's power is maintained, not threatened by the government. So as a result, they need to go. So they've launched all of these specious attacks, especially at those two men and their spouses, claiming that they have some sort of ethical lapses when everything they've done has been above board. And they've, in fact, shared everything they possibly should when it comes to their relationships with other people, including rich people. And yet the left has really demonized them, haven't they, Carrie?
Well, absolutely. And, it's really telling because tell me which decision it is that Justice Alito or Justice Thomas has voted in a surprising way. You're like, well, that's weird. Why would he do that? Oh, it must be because he's trying to curry favor with someone. Zero. It's just never happened. I mean, these guys are actually behaving on the court the same way everyone who was voting on their nominations knew they were going to be behaving. That's why Joe Biden voted against them, right? It's so absurd to even suggest, and I don't think they can even with a straight face suggest that somehow either of these men has changed their votes based on any, having a friend, that happens to own a plane or something.
Right.
That's absurd. And so that's why they're not really even talking about it. They're trying to just piece together things and raised eyebrows and make it look like an ethics violation when in fact, no, they've followed the rules that are laid down for every other judge and justice. They just want to change the rules until they can impact the conservative justice and try to get them off the important cases.
They just bang the scandal drum until people believe it, for sure. And when it comes to the other people in Washington, you're right. I mean, corruption is definitely everywhere. Conflict of interest definitely everywhere. President Biden himself, his family's taken untold sums of money from foreign interests, and which has been the subject, of course, of a gigantic impeachment inquiry into the Bidens. He's pretending like that's not an issue at all. I mean, just a very simple thing, Carrie Severino. We don't even know who visits him in Delaware. The White House doesn't even provide information about who visits the president when he's away for 40% of his presidency in Delaware. We're not entitled to that information, apparently. So the idea that he's accusing others of ethical lapses is laughable.
I mean, this whole thing is such you can't parody it. It's kind of like AOC is the one who says we should start impeaching justices for ethical lapses. I'm like, oh my gosh, this woman has been investigated for all these. She's the least serious member of Congress, and this is your standard bearer. So yeah, having Joe Biden out there trying to talk about ethics and corruption is really rich.
Let me ask you about this amendment that he's proposing. He's proposing a constitutional amendment called the "No One Is the Above the Law" amendment, and here's how it's described. Quote, "It would make clear that there is no immunity for crimes a former president committed while in office. I share our founders' belief that the president's power is limited, not absolute. We are a nation of laws, not of kings or dictators." Now, let me just pull back and talk about the case he's referencing. The United States Supreme Court concluded, quite obviously, that the Biden administration was abusing its power by prosecuting Trump, his political opponent. And they rendered a judgment to that effect, and they sent it back to the lower courts, and they said it's important that you recognize that a president's official acts do have immunity. So you have to make some distinctions here between what acts you think were official and what acts you think were not official. Do I have that right?
Yeah, and that's the funny thing is, that case is a law, is a rule rather, that's going to be applying even-handedly to all presidents, including President Biden. And you know what? I think he probably should be grateful. The climate of lawfare that we live in right now, he's not someone who will fare very well if that is being weaponized against him as well, because we all know that the long list of concerns people might have in lawsuits that could be brought by a later administration. This is the kind of ruling that ties a future second-term President Trump's hands every bit as much as it does Joe Biden. So
yes.
That's why, if he really thought, look, we know that there's just no way in the short term he's going to be able to get, even if there were the will to do so, a constitutional amendment is a heavy lift, and it should be. We don't want to amend our founding documents lightly. But I think if he really thought that were a real likelihood to be passed, he might think twice about it, because I think at the end of the day that court ruling, which they realized was not just about Trump. It's about setting the standard that's going to apply to every president. Right. I think he's going to want that one to apply to himself as well.
But the concept of immunity for a president of the United States, long understood in the civil case, I mean, the idea that presidents should be free from having to deal with lawsuits for all of their official actions, it got extended in this Supreme Court decision. They concluded that, criminal actions should be treated the same way. That you shouldn't take criminal actions against a president. That's an important principle, isn't it, for the president of the United States to be able to act without those types of restrictions placed upon his office?
Well, sure, because the president, if you thought that someone's going to be just going after you, trying to nitpick every decision you made as a president, it really ties your hands. It makes it much harder to have the freedom. And so the court was balanced. They didn't say, much opposed to what you hear people talking in the media. They didn't say presidents are above the law. They said very clearly the opposite. They said, there are certain things that are the core presidential decisions, like granting a pardon. The president doesn't have standards in the Constitution that he's only allowed to grant certain pardons. He's allowed to do that. You can't have people trying to dive into his motivations on things, because they're just going to destroy this president's ability to function, right? So if it's a core presidential function, they actually are going to get the benefit of the doubt and say, no, you can't create a criminal offense out of this. But there's actually a whole large range of things that might be official action. I mean, I think of the SEAL Team 6 example that was in one of the dissents, saying, he could order SEAL Team 6 to kill his political opponents. Well, okay, that might be an official action, but the court didn't say all official actions are fair game as well. They said at that point, the court or the government trying to bring the lawsuit then has to show that it's not going to impede the president's ability to carry out his office if we did make that criminal. And you know what? I think everyone can agree our presidents can still function if they're not allowed to order political assassinations of their opponents. So seems to me that would be clearly, the president doesn't get immunity from this. So there's the huge range of things. It's still not even covered. He just is relying on, the way the media has spun this. People get concerned about, because the picture they're painting is a frightening one where presidents are truly above the law.
And we've become so accustomed to Congress abdicating its responsibility in everything from actually creating laws. They cede it all to the agencies, to using the impeachment clause of the Constitution. If a president is that out of control, the founders literally built in a way to handle that situation.
Exactly, and that's what the impeachment power is for, which doesn't have to, by the way, show all of those things. You wouldn't have to go and say, well, is this part of his central authority? If they could impeach him if there was a high crime and misdemeanor committed regarding one of his core presidential powers. That is the default constitutional check on a president, is the impeachment.
Finally, Carrie, in your assessment, how much has the left damaged the institution of the United States Supreme Court in constantly beating that drum of saying that people shouldn't trust the court at all, including in some of the very wise and prudent decisions they've been making?
Yeah, I think this is a real tragedy, the level to which the Supreme Court as an institution has become collateral damage in all of these fights over various policy issues, which they're not even enforced with deciding. But when the left realized that they can't strong arm the court into doing their will, then they just decided, if you can't beat them, destroy them. And that's kind of what they're doing, is like, hey, if we can't use this institution to work our will, which for a lot of American history, unfortunately, a lot of this last century, they were able to achieve. Since they're not able to do that, I think they just said, okay, well, we're gonna try to destroy it then, and that has been a real tragedy. You've got American people losing confidence in maybe the only remotely functional branch of government we have right now, and that's very sad.
It definitely is. Carrie Severino with the Judicial Crisis Network. Always nice to talk to you. Thank you very much for your time today.
Great talking to you, Vince.
Good to talk to you. Yeah. So Biden out today, the lame duck, coming out and saying, you know what needs to go? That awful Supreme Court. Why is that? Well, because the left doesn't control it, so they need to destroy it. Right? Just as Carrie said, if you can't beat them, destroy them is the left's position on this. All right, your phone calls ahead, and we've got a lot more to get to. I've got to talk about this Kamala campaign and how it's really going to start going downhill very soon here. This is great. So there's a campaign event for Kamala Harris being held today in Pennsylvania, Montgomery County, Pennsylvania, at Wissahickon High School. Governors Josh Shapiro of Pennsylvania, Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer are doing this together. I guess it's a high school gym, and they're going to it holds up to 1,000 people total. Now, by way of comparison, President Trump just had an event this weekend in Minnesota. They say it was a capacity crowd in this stadium. It was like 8,000 people or something. My guess is it was more than that, but just a quick comparison between the two campaigns. Here's something that I just came across the wire. The Associated Press's reporter Steve Peoples says that Kamala Harris's campaign is blocking reporters from even talking to the voters outside of the press pen. They have to stay in a pen. They're not allowed to talk to voters at the event. This is going great. And the amazing thing is, not that amazing because it's predictable, but the press is going to keep taking this beating for a very long time before they raise any questions about it. Okay, I guess we'll stay in the press pen. We're not going to talk to the voters. Yeah, at some point, you have to grow a pair. You have to be like, hey, why don't I talk to the voters and you stay out of it? Buzz off, buddy. Hey, what do you think of Kamala Harris? What do you think of this campaign? Why are you voting for her? Why do you support her? Basic questions. They don't even want these people asking that. They're so scared of those types of questions. And they're also scared, as you know, of Kamala Harris answering questions. She's been the candidate for over a week now, right? How many interviews has she done? Big fat goose egg? None. How many unscripted moments has she had? Big fat goose egg? None. Because they know things go south when she starts talking. Let me see here. William calling in from Manassas, line 4. William, good afternoon, sir. You're on the Vince Colonnese Show.
Hey, Vince. Thanks for taking my call.
Yes, sir. Go for it.
Hey, so I like to study politics online, whatever. And the historian Alan Lichtman, he's prominent for his 13 keys analysis, which predicted 9 of the past 10 presidential elections. Basically, so by his keys, as he's been doing many live streams for the past several months, whatever, arguing that Biden's a shoo-in, whatever, that according to his keys, whatever, there's no way that Trump could win. But with Kamala as replacing him, that actually ticked off one of the keys, whatever, because one of the keys is that if the incumbent is running, then basically that favors the establishment party, the party that has the White House at the time winning. So the current keys basically that stand whatever is that they lost seats in the last midterms in the 2022. They don't have an incumbent running. They have no major victory overseas, and they have a major disaster overseas in Ukraine and Israel.
Right.
And the person they're running is clearly not a once-in-a-lifetime charismatic candidate.
Yeah, that's you may be understating it. Yeah, no, this is a good point. I've been seeing these headlines. This guy Fox with a big headline on the subject today that he's predicted almost every election since 1984, and he's thinking at this moment that Trump's the guy. Yeah, it's good. Thank you, William. That's interesting. A little cause for optimism. I kind of like the world where we all think that this is so nail-bitingly close that nobody sits home. It's good. Every poll that comes out that shows actually Harris is doing great. Good. Let's keep that energy. That's the kind of energy that causes us to win elections. You got to fight for this. As President Trump might say, fight, fight, fight. Coming up in the next hour, Mary Catherine Ham also will explore what's going on with the Kamala Harris campaign as they hold segregated events, getting back to their party's roots.